like it. You want a podcast like it? Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. Just podcast like it. Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. You want a podcast like it's 1999.
Hello and welcome to Podcast Like It's 1999, the podcast where we talk about the films of 1999 from inside Orga here in 2021. I'm one of your hosts, Kenny Neibart.
And I'm Phil Iskov.
And with us today is Anupam Nigam. I'm sorry, Anupam. I forgot to ask to pronounce your last name. It is Nigam,
It's
right?
Nigam. Nigam, we dig 'em.
Nigam, sorry. My bad. But yes, we do dig him. He's back on the pod from the Blue Streak episode, one of my favorites. And it's so good to have you again. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Life?
Thank you so much for having me back. The fun thing after doing the first one is I didn't realize so many of my friends loved Blue Streak. You know, like, so,
there you go.
I don't know how many times I was having dinner with a friend where I was like, yeah, I just did this podcast about Blue Streak. And they're like, Blue Streak? Oh my God.
Yeah, people love
Streak's
Blue Streak.
A good flick.
Yeah.
It's a good one. Yeah, I don't know if you listened to our 52 in review, but I believe it had some presence on both of our lists.
I believe that we both nominated Luke Wilson.
How could you not? Tour de force.
Tour de force.
I may nominate him for the end of the podcast. Nominations.
Really?
Who knows?
Wow.
I loved him so much. But today we're doing something very relevant, very topical.
Mm-hmm.
The whole world has Kong and Godzilla fever.
Yeah.
I think on you maybe Team Godzilla. I'm not sure.
Just a little bit, yes.
The biggest Godzilla fan I know is Anupam.
We are doing Godzilla 2000.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Godzilla movie made by Toho, who made the original Godzillas and all the Godzilla versus all of the monsters. It came out 99, but it's called Godzilla 2000. I understand why. The marketing was too good to pass up.
That's right.
And I watched this movie. Phil, you watched this movie.
I
did. Talk to me about this movie. What are we working with here?
So it's a.
Can I just rewind very quickly, just for a quick second, just to get some context on you and Godzilla?
Sure.
Just because I feel like you guys go way back.
Talk to me about you and Godzilla first.
And we'd love to know when he came into your life and why you love him so much.
The funny thing is, I honestly can't remember not being a Godzilla fan. I think like most little boys, I was into dinosaurs as a kid. And it just evolved into being a Godzilla fan. And I also think I have an older brother, and I think he was a monster fan before I showed up. And I think because of him, he might have been my entree into all the monsters, right? Like King Kong, Dracula, Frankenstein, and Godzilla. But Godzilla was one of our favorites. One of my sort of earliest memories of being a Godzilla fan is, Kenny, I think you remember, I'm from New Jersey.
Of course.
And the local affiliate there, WWOR-TV, which is Channel 9, on Thanksgiving, they would show 3 King Kong movies on Thanksgiving Day, and then they would show 3 Godzilla movies on Black Friday. And to me, that's like what made it the holidays, that we get to just kick back and watch monster movies all day. And I was always felt cheated on the Godzilla Day if they showed the original King Kong versus Godzilla. I was like, that's not fair. That's a King Kong movie. I should get
that's a Kong movie.
Only Godzilla movie.
That's a 50-50 at least.
That's right. And I also remember as a little kid, back then, like you would actually check the newspaper to see what movies were on. Mm-hmm. And I remember our local paper was the Star Ledger, and every Saturday I would get the Star Ledger. I would look at the TV grid and see they had a separate section for movies, and I would just be like, "Oh, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster is on at 3:00 today. I'm going to watch that."
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the thing about Godzilla, and again, the total layman, I've seen a couple of them. I certainly haven't seen all of them. It feels as though there are purists who prefer the sort of the OG Godzilla movies that are almost stop motion for lack of a better way of putting it. And then there's sort of this line in the sand which feels like it's the Broderick American movie, right? Which
Wait,
is
hold
sort
on.
of
Hang one second.
Okay.
I do want to get this clear. Are they stop motion? I thought they were always man in a suit.
They're man in suit. Maybe once in a blue moon, there's a stop motion scene in the movie, but they are mostly what you call suitmation.
Okay. So sure, a guy in a suit or suit. Okay, sure. My apologies. I guess they're a lot more tactile, I guess is the best way to put it. They're mostly black and white, if I'm not mistaken.
No, only the first two in Japan. Only the first two are in black and white. Yeah.
Okay. How many Godzilla films are there?
Oh, off the top of my head, I think there are something like 26 Japanese. Maybe 26 altogether. Okay. I'm just saying.
That makes more sense. Okay. I think because Kenny winged it and said 15 prior to Broderick, but I think it might be a little higher. But I could
count them out now if you wanted to, but I don't think you want to wait.
So there are. All right. So there are 15 quote unquote classic Japanese Godzilla movies.
Okay.
So
that does not include. Okay, sorry.
And that I believe goes to 72 with an installment entitled Godzilla versus Anupam. You can feel free to correct me. Gigan.
Okay, so there are a few more after that one. I actually think it goes more.
Oh, you're right. There's in 75 Terror of Mechagodzilla.
Terror of Mechagodzilla would be the last one in the original era of Godzilla movies. Godzilla movies are actually split into eras. The movies you're talking about that start in 1954 and go to like 1978 are called the Showa era. There would be another era after that called the Heisei era, which is like technically started in 1989, but there's a movie called Godzilla in 1985 that most fans believe kicked off the second era. And then the movie we're here to talk about today kicks off the third era, which is called the Millennium era. Okay. But I think the Showa
Emperor
era
Millennium. That he must be a great emperor.
So when you speak of the Millennium period, does that include the American films? Is that all in one kind of thing, or are the American films their own thing?
I think most Godzilla fans would consider the American movies their own thing. They're actually called either the Legendary Universe or the Monsterverse.
Fair enough.
They're technically all in something called the Reiwa period now.
Okay, so let's break down what we're talking about. Not that we shouldn't go back to the Millennium where we're living with this movie, but the Legendary Universe, I assume, refers to the production company. They have the rights to Godzilla and Kong, or just Godzilla?
It seems like they have the rights to both, because they've made two Kong movies now too. So whether they're licensing them, I don't know what the legal part of it is, but it seems like they have permission to use Kong as much as they want.
Yeah, it's so. What's interesting about this, and this does sort of hone in on Godzilla 2000, which is that Godzilla 2000, for all intents and purposes, and I don't want to speak with authority here, and that's why we have you here on, but it feels as though it was a reaction to the Broderick film, right? So the Broderick film comes out in 98, and everyone fucking hates it. Like, not even just Godzilla fans, like basically everyone. Like, no one. It's
a very, very bad movie and a very bad experience. And it was.
I agree with all that.
I'm sure everyone remembers the marketing was out of control. Yeah. It was primed to be the biggest movie of all time. I mean, it was either it beats Titanic or it's a failure. And it was what people thought Titanic was going to be, right? Like, people thought Titanic was going to be an epic disaster, and Godzilla really was an epic disaster in every sense of the word. And it also kind of poisoned Godzilla for American audiences for a generation.
A while. Yeah. It's so Roland Emmerich comes off of Independence Day, which obviously an enormous film. He becomes the new sort of master of disaster films, for lack of a better way of putting it, or at least like that's what everyone.
There's no better way to put it. You nailed it.
Yeah.
And Godzilla, for all intents and purposes, on paper, I think we can all agree makes complete sense for this guy to do. Like, it's a no-brainer, and the film is just terrible. But there's a sort of a legal loophole they have, I guess, and by they I mean the original rights holders. are able to finagle a way to make Godzilla 2000 without stepping on the rights that Sony purchased. Am I correct in that assessment?
My understanding is Japan. So at the end of that Heisei period, which was the 90s, they killed Godzilla in the last movie, in a movie called Godzilla versus Destroyer. And with the anticipation that America will make a hit franchise of Godzilla movies and we'll just kick back and collect money. So my understanding is Columbia TriStar or Sony TriStar had the rights till 2003, and Japan didn't plan on making another Godzilla movie till 2005. They were just going to let Americans make big budget movies. But when this movie came out and it, drastically underperformed, and they felt like it hurt their brand, Godzilla's like Mickey Mouse in Japan. They felt like it hurt their brand. They had to respond with the movie that we're here to talk about. And I do think they had to do, like you're saying, some tap dancing about they didn't want to go to say, we hated your movie, so we're going to make our own. And this is the funny thing is, the premise of a Sony TriStar sequel wasn't completely not happening. The movie still made something $380 million worldwide, and they bought the rights. And so Japan Toho had to be a little bit while they were still possibly planning a sequel, be we're also gonna do something that restores our brand.
So for a little bit of sort of production context, apparently due to high demand from fans to revive the Toho Godzilla, development began on a new Toho production 2 months after the release of TriStar's Godzilla. The executive producer and writer of Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla and the writer of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 wrote the script. And they basically, we wanted to make a new kind of Godzilla. We needed different views. That's why he chose these screenwriters. One producer, 2 screenwriters, 3 viewpoints, I guess, was the way that they kind of, went into this whole thing.
It's definitely strange to say we want a new take and hire all people who've made Godzilla movies.
So American, though. We do the same shit. You want a new take on Star Wars? Let's hire Lawrence Kasdan. So,
I will say,
it's just that's what we always do. But,
But I will say, let me blow your minds. I want to blow your minds for a minute, though. I just want to say one thing. I actually don't have the venom for the American Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie that a lot of people have. I do feel like they did. It's clearly not my favorite Godzilla movie. It probably wouldn't be on my list of favorite Godzilla movies. But I did like that it was a different take. I did like that Godzilla could move fast. I did like that he could climb on buildings. I did like that he could sort of dodge and duck and not get hit by stuff. I feel like a lot of the things the Toho movies say about Godzilla are because of production reasons, that there's a man in a 180-pound suit.
Keep referring to Godzilla as he, when it's very clear at the end of that movie, Godzilla is she.
She, yeah.
I'm not sure, because they go out of their way in that movie to also not say that.
Unless male Godzilla's legs. Who knows?
I think Matthew Broderick says it's asexual. He says he uses the term asexual in it, so it's neither he or she. But traditionally, he is referred to as he.
I want to say also, one of the things that I didn't like about the Broderick version is Godzilla's actual look. He really just looks like a T-Rex. They make him too dinosaur-y and not lizard enough.
He's very iguana-like too.
He's very square-faced in a way that isn't. What I like about the new Godzilla, he's a chonky boy. I like that he's got that he's this kind of lumbering thing. He shouldn't be too stealthy. So I don't know.
I think the Matthew Broderick one made critical errors that the 2001 goes out of its way to avoid.
Yes,
the big thing for me is in the Roland Emmerich one, it's hard to tell if Godzilla's the hero or the villain of the movie, because they keep playing sympathetic music whenever he shows up, but they're all trying to kill him for the whole movie.
It's true. I have a lot of questions about Godzilla.
And
please,
tons. What I want to make is the biggest problem with the Godzilla 1998 is he's too handsome. So I agree with you. He's a handsome monster, but Godzilla is actually a giant version of the Toxic Avenger. He's a hideous monster. That's part of his thing. Okay. Anupam, the main question I have for you. I have 2 questions. They connect. One is objectively, why is Godzilla good? And the second one is subjectively, why is Godzilla good?
So I will say the one of Godzilla's biggest appeals, I think, and he obviously has a lot of appeal for little kids. Little kids love Godzilla movies. I think there is something about when you're a kid watching a character who is more powerful than your parents, basically. Like your parents are the most powerful people in your universe. Godzilla doesn't care what your parents think. I think there's something for little kids that like, oh, he's so powerful. Godzilla, like if he makes a mess, no one can force him to like clean up that mess. You know, like if he just feels like wading out to the ocean, he's going to wade out to the ocean. He lives I think something that kids would like, he lives primarily a consequence-free life. You know, like if he destroys a city and goes out of the ocean, he's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to make me clean up this mess? And so I think that's sort of his appeal to at least a lot of American fans and kids everywhere. And there's also a little bit of that X-Men appeal, which is that like sort of on a more elevated level, is that we're always trying to kill him, but when we need him to help us, he does. You know, I think there's a sort of more elevated thing there, that like that sort of conundrum of, yes, he's dangerous, but he's a hero. He's an anti-hero. He's a hero.
Yeah, it's like he might be an asshole, but he's our asshole.
That's right, exactly. And going way back to the original, his appeal was he represented Japan's fear of nuclear radiation. You know, they had 2 nuclear bombs dropped on them, and Godzilla exists because there was just this fear of radiation. Like the reason he was created was like there was a newspaper article where about irradiated fish, like years after, in the 50s, years after the nuclear bombs, irradiated fish made a whole town sick. And that's what like gave the producer the idea of like, oh, this is still a fear Japanese people have. So he's got that going for him in Japan. I think here, and just with young fans everywhere, it's that he's this powerful creature that doesn't follow any rules, doesn't have to listen to your parents. Like it doesn't matter what you throw at him. You know, he's just going to do his own thing no matter what he wants. And also he evolved into a superhero in the Showa era. So.
And then the follow-up question, subjectively, why do you love him? Or the films or whatever it is. Why does this connect to you in a way where you own shirts and posters?
I think it's mostly for that reason, that I was a little kid and he was just unstoppable. He was unbeatable and unstoppable. And again, I think I have that sort of, the DNA in my brain just loves giant monsters, loves dinosaurs and stuff like that. I even, before Phil and I worked together, I worked on a TV show that was just about robots fighting giant monsters. And it was sort of a detour into family programming. But when I heard giant monsters, I was like, go on. I'm listening. So that was called Mech X4. It's on Disney Plus if you want to check it out. And I don't know why I've always been in his corner, because for his first 4 movies in Japan, he's the villain. So he fights other monsters and loses. And I like hate those movies. Because like, how can he lose? And one of those is King Kong, by the way. King Kong beats him in his 3rd movie.
So there's also a destructive component, right? Which comes back to sort of this idea of just it comes back to consequences, but it also comes back to sort of unstoppability. It comes back to kids just wanting to break things, right? Like this guy just kind of destroys buildings and cities and leaves, just destruction in his wake. And everyone's kind of cool with that. It also, I want to ask a question because I don't know the answer to this. I've not seen the first Godzilla film, and I don't know if this is answered in the first Godzilla film, but like the birth of Godzilla, what actually created him? Do we ever see that? Is it sort of said just in kind of expo? How is that really? So
I think you're to believe he's a prehistoric creature that is both woken up and mutated by like bikini bomb tests in the 50s. Okay. The only movie where you literally kind of see his creation is again in those 90s movies. It's a Heisei movie where it's called Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. It's a weird thing. When I was a kid, he was called King Ghidorah, but now they call him King Ghidorah. It's a time travel movie where they realize there's a dinosaur living on an island that gets hit with a nuclear bomb, and they move the dinosaur away, so Godzilla's never created.
I see.
So
Okay.
you see it in that one, and that's pretty much. And then the legendary, he just always existed. He was just a prehistoric creature.
It seems it's one of the few. So this kind of taps into Kenny's questions a little bit too, and I'm curious as to your thoughts on this, Anupam, because watching this Godzilla 2000 film the other day, and watching Godzilla versus Kong a few days previous to that, I or maybe it was the same day, I don't know. There is something that you inherently turn your brain off for these films, right? Like they really cannot. You can't really be critical of them on a sort of a storytelling lens or any of those sort of things. And I think that freedom also is a part of the appeal to these films, right? Or at least specifically to Godzilla. Maybe less so to King Kong, which feels a little bit more emotional to some degree or another. And I think that freedom is really kind of beautiful and kind of its own thing. I know that there are people that love B movies, and I don't mean to suggest that these are necessarily B films, but like there is something in that oeuvre that draws people in. And I think that's a little bit of this. There's a little bit of like, I don't need to know where this guy came from. I kind of get it. Like it just sort of feels like it's like in our DNA, pop culture wise. I don't know. It definitely
requires a lot of suspension of disbelief to enjoy these movies. Yes. Especially in that Showa series where just other monsters randomly show up.
Sure.
It looks like that 90s Heisei series was meant to be a little more grounded. So a lot of the creatures he faces, their origins are from Godzilla somehow. Right. Like there's a plant version of Godzilla, there's a mechanical version of Godzilla, there's a space version of Godzilla, and then the last movie, Destroyer, is also somewhat. Has Godzilla DNA.
Even the I think it's 2014 film that came out with Bryan Cranston and Juliette Binoche, like that's the most grounded, like that's the Dark Knight of Godzilla films, if you ask me.
Yeah, either that or the original. I would say both pretty grounded.
I watched the original, and I also watched King Kong. In anticipation of watching Godzilla versus Kong. It's important, to know where these characters came from.
Sure, sure.
It's not really important. I'm kidding. And the original King Kong is, the original Godzilla is a fucking art film. Like it's an art.
It's beautiful.
I don't know if it's beautiful. It's just,
I think it's beautifully made.
You take out the monster stuff and it's basically like a drama about the inner workings of the Japanese government and how they deal with this impending attack from this unseeable, unknowable force. But it is a lot of like scenes in whatever the Japanese parliament is, with people giving speeches and presentations about what we can do and what we can't do. I mean, I watched the version without Raymond Burr. I don't know how that changes it, and it wasn't dubbed, it was subtitled. And it's a heady film, and there are incredibly cool parts in it, with Godzilla coming over the mountains and you seeing this truly hideous, like toxic monster who's going to eat you all, like nightmare fuel stuff. So I do think that I blanch at the idea that you should ever turn your brain off in a movie, particularly one that's origins are, this is our emotional national response to being attacked with a nuclear bomb. And also this is very clear in the film, to also being part of a nuclear arms race, to being like they're not like, this is not what I kind of thought it might be, which is like, this is poor Japan which they were, don't get me wrong. Poor Japan was attacked by a nuclear bomb and we're the ones bearing the brunt. This movie is, we were part of a really fucked up system where we were testing nuclear bombs. The Allies are testing nuclear bombs. The Germans were testing nuclear bombs. We all share, responsibility for what happened here. So those origins, and you could understand the appeal of the, you know, Space Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla, and all that stuff, but there's a lot more headier things in this series than just like monster fights, right? And I would also say, just for me at least, B movies in general do need to bring something a little bigger than these are two crazy animals, monsters fighting for them to be worthwhile. And all the best B movies do. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the George Romero movies, they all bring something deeper and scarier and allegorical that make them classics. As you get bigger and bigger and bigger, like Kong versus Godzilla really is just a fucking monster smackdown. Well, and that's fine. I'm okay with that. But because they have the budget to make it a giant, big fucking monster smackdown. But the little ones really are about something deep and traumatic and upsetting. And I would also say, I mean, I watched King Kong 2, and I'm a King Kong. We're a King Kong house. Not to go all, Capulet to Montague on you.
Yeah, sure.
But but Kong is about some shit too. Kong is about the legacy of slavery. So like these are about some shit. Sorry, go ahead, Phil.
I don't mean to suggest that B movies or that this series or any of these films, or quite frankly any film for that matter, isn't birthed in ideas. You don't sit down to write something or direct something or make a film. We all know how hard it is to make these things without having something to say. My point more than anything is that I don't think a lot of people go to these films for the ideas. That's not to say that subconsciously it isn't there and that there isn't a substance to what's going on and that people aren't tapping into it in one way or another. But I do think that, it's part of why I think Godzilla versus Kong works outside of, the special effects, which I think are pretty fantastic, but because I think people are going for popcorn entertainment. They want something that does not require them to spend much time thinking about the human condition. They're going there because they want to see big things blow up or big animals fight,
right?
To some degree.
I feel like if you ask me, Godzilla usually comes with his own commentary, which is that humans created this.
Right.
And anytime he comes and destroys a city, it's like, you did this to yourself with your hubris and scientific testing and stuff. I feel like if you wanted me to subscribe to sort of belief to Godzilla versus Kong, it's that humanity is divorced. Like, there are good humans and then there are bad humans. Like, there are humans that are doing things that are making Godzilla angry and bringing all of these things back down on them. This is a spoil. We can talk about spoilers, right? Okay. And then there are humans who want Kong, who basically use Kong as a pawn in this movie. Yeah. And they chain him up and airlift him places, but their hearts are kind of in the right place. So it's just kind of like the things human beings are willing to do.
I guess, and I know this is going to seem like an attack, Phil, but don't take it like an attack.
I promise I won't.
I don't think people ever turn their brains off. I don't think that's a thing, right? Like, I think that...
But you literally told me to turn my brain off for like a Bruckheimer movie when we were doing the Bruckheimer series.
Well, your brain is different, man. All right, so no. Because your brain was a nitpicking brain. Your brain was a how are these things? So all right, I'll parse that.
Okay.
There's suspension of disbelief. All right, which I think is an important thing to have while watching any movie. No movie is going to adhere to real life, and that's what I was asking you to do when I said turn your brain off, suspend your disbelief. In terms of turning your brain off, movies don't work unless they work on multiple levels, and monster movies or sci-fi or horror or anything that's allegorical. Only works if it's undergirded by something that speaks to you as a person. If it doesn't speak to you as a person, it's walking into a fucking, gym on a random Saturday night and seeing two people fight. That's not for me at least, I don't ever really don't watch sports for the athletic competition. I watch sports for the stories behind it, right? And I always have. And like, I know I say this as a wrestling fan who I love wrestling, but like the actual fight parts are boring as shit to me. It's the stories.
I think that.
So all I'm saying is, and I think you know this from pitching and from writing TV, like all the whiz bang stuff is just a way to Trojan horse what you really want to do.
We are saying very, very close to the same thing, just to be like, and perhaps I'm not being articulate on my end in the sense that I think that when I say turn my brain off, I mean what you're talking about in terms of nitpicky. In terms of like being analytical about a film. I think that when someone goes to see a Godzilla film, or I mean, perhaps even a Michael Bay film, or any of that sort of these big sort of, what have yous, I agree with you. Character is everything, right? The only reason that Godzilla versus Kong works is because you care about these two creatures, and if you don't, then there's no fucking point. And the film just doesn't work. But I'm speaking more to sort of this idea of when I go to see a film like that, I am turning off a part of my brain that is thinking about, thesis statements or structure or, storytelling for all intents and purposes. I'm really just trying to see something for the spectacle of it and for the fun of it.
I feel like the best example, the example I use when people talk about this stuff is the movie Face Off.
Sure.
You either buy the premise that you can swap face, like you could nitpick this. There's organ rejection. Like, their voices are identical. It's like you could nitpick that thing to death. You just have to buy that piece of it. Yeah. And then it's not like Nicolas Cage grows wings halfway through the movie that required you to turn your, everything after that big buy. I guess you call it the big buy. There's a big buy for every movie. And once you buy that big buy, everything else after that makes sense. Like there's a Godzilla movie in '93 called Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla 2. It's called that because there's another one in the show series called that, but it's really just Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, where off screen somebody went to Japanese Congress and said, yes, I think we should spend $6 billion building a robot Godzilla. Thank you. And they do it. Japan builds this giant robot. You have to buy that they're willing to do that. And then everything else after that, kind of, nothing else like strains credulity.
But yeah, big premises are the best. Like big premises, and I agree. And that is you have to watch movies by accepting what you're given in the first act. That's the game, right? That's the game. Yeah. In terms of the beauty that you're talking about, Phil, is there is a beauty to a movie that can say, don't think about the stuff you think about when you watch a movie, because it's there. Mm-hmm. It's all there. Totally. The movie wouldn't work unless it had all that stuff. You would You would hate it. But
there's no dumber way to kill Cary Grant than with a biplane in a cornfield. Like if your mission was to kill Cary Grant, it's like just have a guy with a knife in the cornfield. Just have a guy with a knife. You just stab him. But like when you're in the movie and you're in the moment, you're not asking that question because what's happening is so.
Why did they do that? That's so stupid.
I have no idea.
Have a guy with a knife.
It's the definition.
I mean,
instead, let's get a plane, let's get a runway, let's get some fuel, let's get.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely fun when you're watching it.
I'm going to give a little bit of context, just a quick synopsis for the people that have not seen Godzilla 2000. I love, this is a ridiculous Google synopsis. It has razor-sharp teeth in a gargantuan mouth, claws that can cut through steel, a roar that echoes back through the centuries, dorsal fins that resemble crimson lightning bolts, and fiery breath that incinerates everything it comes in contact with. Soon, all in the creature's wake is utterly destroyed, and a terrified Japan can only wonder where this monstrous beast will appear next. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, is back. Tremendous. Godzilla 2000 screened at the Tokyo International Film Festival on November 9th, 1999. It then was released around the world throughout 2000. It would end up making around $30 million worldwide. Sony's TriStar Pictures licensed Godzilla 2000, which is such a they're like, well, I mean, ours sucked, but we'll buy yours and distribute it overseas. Anyway, Sony spent approximately $300,000 to acquire the film, around $1 million to re-edit and dub the film in English, and under $10 million in print and advertising. For doing so, TriStar hoped that the film would gross no worse than $12 to $15 million in North American theaters. It eventually only grossed $10 million in North American theaters. It's got 57% on Rotten Tomatoes from critics, 54% from audiences. The Houston Chronicle said the film taps into a now rare and innocent sense of wonder, and its action scenes are well conceived, summarizing it as a lovable, amusing foray into vapid plotting, bad dubbing, and men in rubber suits trashing miniature sets. Entertainment Weekly gave the film a B grade, saying Godzilla 2000 lands on an imaginative fault line somewhere between tackiness and awe. Boston Globe said Godzilla 2000 is a ton of fun. Slate said it's fun to see. It still manages to dispel some of the lingering stink of Roland Emmerich's 1998 remake. And the New York Times said only a diehard fan of the long-running Japanese Godzilla series could love Godzilla 2000. Can we talk about the dubbing for a second?
Sure.
Because the dubbing is insane. It is, but part of the charm of it is how badly dubbed it is.
It's kind of tough to dub a movie well. I mean, it's just
fair point.
Really,
Yes.
what I will give them credit for is changing some of the dialogue to make it more appealing to American audiences.
Sure.
You know, they used like phrases like "crap through a goose." They have the best. They have the reporter woman says "bite me," which they don't really say in Japan. You know, there's even a point where a guy sees an alien and he goes "Gotten Himmel." Like, why is a Japanese guy saying "Gotten Himmel"? You know, so they took. I will give them credit for that. They took some swings. It's like, if you think this is bad, then if you watch another guy, there are really, really bad. This is actually a noble effort.
Do you?
To try.
I wanted to ask you about the budget in comparison to previous Godzilla films, because again, I have not seen many of the originals, so I apologize on that front. I appreciated and enjoyed the budget of this one. It felt a little bit like one foot in the past, a little bit of a foot in the present, just based on some of the effects. And I thought it was really well shot. Like, you can tell that someone with vision actually made this film, despite the fact that, you know, it might be quote unquote cheesy. It's very well lensed. It looks really cool. There's some, you know, the first time that Godzilla shows up and they're like the car and they're going backwards, that whole, you know, chase scene is really well done. So how does it compare effects wise to sort of earlier Godzilla films?
The movie definitely, for me, gets an A for effort. They were definitely trying to do things other Godzilla movies hadn't done. They did a lot more Godzilla with a green screen behind him than like building all the miniature sets. They clearly did that. They built all the miniature sets. Sort of an interesting thing about that too is this might be the first time Japan shrunk Godzilla. Like his last appearance, he was like 110 meters tall. This time they reduced him in half to like 55 meters. Because when you do that, you can build your sets more detailed. Right. And they look more real. And, you know, obviously there's a lot of CG shots of the alien. They use CG for a lot more things than they normally do. Like even that shot of all the helicopters coming out over the horizon to try and attack Godzilla. It's also, I believe, the first Japanese Godzilla movie where there's a completely CGI shot of Godzilla. There's just one of him swimming through the ocean.
Looked cool, though.
And it looked cool. It looked cool. I mean, it doesn't really stand up to VFX today. I think they spent a little bit more money on this. Sadly, I don't think it was just had sort of a middling box office in Japan.
Yeah, it didn't do great. Do you think that there's a lot of UFO stuff in this movie? There's arguably more UFO stuff than there is Godzilla stuff in this film.
Yeah,
that's a big problem with this movie. I mean, the thing I kept feeling was more Godzilla. Like, especially I would imagine for people in Japan, they've waited quite a while for Godzilla, and there's not a lot of Godzilla.
It's funny because at least this movie starts off Godzilla-centric. It's all about the Godzilla Prediction Network, and it's about where is Godzilla, how do we contain him? Like, there are other Godzilla movies where he just kind of strolls through his own movie.
When did they start with the notion of the Godzilla Prediction Network?
That's the first time it appears. Is in
Oh,
this
really?
movie,
I
is
love the Godzilla Prediction Network.
I do too.
That's
I
the
wish we
coolest
had it.
thing. Well, I can I ask you guys a question, an aside that I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Okay. In Godzilla versus Kong and the Godzilla verse and the Kong verse and all these monster verse things, they live in a world where monsters exist. They come from Hollow Earth and they come out and they eat us or whatever.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's just life. They have prediction networks. They contain Kong, et cetera, et cetera. Can you think of anything in real life that is as crazy as that? That's just a crazy thing that has happened in real life. That's just that's like that we just accept. You know, like occasionally a Godzilla will come. Now I understand how ludicrous this question seems on its face. Nothing is as crazy as Godzilla or King Kong, you would think. But I will posit, I think the chameleon's really crazy. I think it's really crazy that there's an animal that if you put him on a brown leaf is brown. If you put him on something striped, becomes striped. That's fucking crazy to me.
It's crazy. I think the platypus is pretty ridiculous. That's
platypus is crazy. Another animal. I think all these animals that do these things, that they're the only animals that do it.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me. Like the chameleon.
I think it's crazy that the kangaroos put like a baby in their pouch. Do they have a pouch?
Well, that's a lot of marsupials do. That's not that crazy.
It's still weird. It's pretty crazy. Yeah. It's pretty crazy.
But I think I think skunks are fucking crazy. They you. But you guys,
possums are pretty crazy.
Is there anything that's just cool? But any event in world history that's just like I can't fucking believe that happened on some street.
Donald Trump's election.
Fucking crazy.
I think that honestly, I think tornadoes might be the answer.
That's the kind of shit I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Like it's like it comes out of nowhere. It can destroy your city, and it's air. Like it's what we breathe to survive. And
perfect
like
cones. They're like these.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of beautiful in a weird way. Like in the Wizard of Oz, it's like kind
Tornadoes
of a really cool effect to see that tornado in the back. Also, just maybe not to get too political, but COVID
obviously
feels like it's a. But it's a crazy thing that took over our country.
It's like those
volcanoes are pretty cool.
Volcanoes, like mountains that shoot fucking liquid lava? Fire at you.
Yeah.
These are the things I'm talking about. Tornadoes, volcanoes. I think these are things we would invent if they didn't actually exist.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Which is funny because I feel like the main character in Godzilla 2000 doesn't see Godzilla as like he sees it as a natural occurring event that we just need to avoid and predict and get out of its way. Like trying to kill it is futile.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because you guys ever played the game? There's no question you both have. SimCity?
Sure.
I have not actually.
Like the old SimCity when you were a child?
I don't remember playing. I played more like shoot 'em up games when I was a kid.
So I can SimCity is this. You build a simulated city and you just try to run it, just normal.
Yeah.
And then when you've got it up and running and things seem to be going pretty well, one of 7 natural disasters can befall you. And these are tidal waves, and these are earthquakes, and these are tornadoes or hurricanes, and also a monster attack. And it's treated in the game as just one of the 7 things that can fuck your city up. So I do think that tornado is a really interesting one. Volcano is a really interesting one. I do think these are the kind of things that can maybe kind of come close to simulating what it's like to be under attack by a Godzilla.
Yeah. I think there are always characters in a Godzilla movie who see that the military's attempt, it's like trying to fight a tornado. You don't fight a tornado.
Right.
You just evacuate the area and you get out of its way and hope it goes back out to the ocean. Like there are characters, but then there are always characters that like this thing is destructive and it's killing people. So let's try and kill it. And it's just like sort of that debate of who's right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's a great question, Kenny, because it's not what I've ever really thought about. But now that I think about these natural disasters, they really just are insane. Like they're crazy.
They're as crazy as a monster attack because that's kind of what they are, right?
Totally.
So you
It's
know,
Mother Nature. Yeah.
It's funny. It's not the question I thought you were going to ask. I thought you were going to ask. I feel like a question a lot of people ask is, why does anyone live in Japan?
Well,
It's like once a year. There's a point where once a year a giant monster comes and destroys a city. But it's the same reason. It's like, why do the people stay in high school in Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Right.
Like someone dies every week in Sunnydale.
Sure, and we see those things in real life all the time, right? Like, why would anybody live in Alaska? That seems crazy to me, but people do, because that's where their parents, that's where their families are, that's where they're comfortable. And I think people in other countries say, why would anyone live in America, where there's a mass shooting every fucking day? Which is a pretty good question. I don't stuff, whatever. I don't feel that way at all. I do think that it's interesting to me that Godzilla, even more so than King Kong, has perpetuated and persevered throughout the culture for the last 70 years. In a way, it's not as if there's a dearth of monster movies and giant monster movies and ones that didn't come from Japan and monster, tall tales and all these kind of things for years and years and years. And why is it Godzilla that has persevered? And I would posit it's because he really is a manifestation of our fears of the uncontrollable, and our fears of what we have, the unseeable and knowable facts or consequences of what we have done to the environment, to our animals, in pursuit of winning wars or having, cheaper energy, whatever it is. So I do and will always think that Godzilla's, and I think this is true for all these things, that Godzilla's prominence is not an accident. It's not just let's make a giant lizard, Yeah.
He's also a symbol. That's the thing about Godzilla. Whether you think he's a symbol of nuclear power run amok, he's also just a symbol of Japan. And he's even entered the pop culture here. Like you see Godzilla wannabes in American commercials and stuff. He actually played Charles Barkley in basketball.
Sure.
Here, and I think in a series of like Dr. Pepper commercials and stuff like that. He's just a symbol of power and Japan and nuclear radiation. I think he means different things to different people. And also because he's this symbol of this country's going to always try and keep Godzilla out there. They're going to always try and keep Godzilla a part of pop culture.
One more point about Godzilla I think is really interesting. You alluded to this earlier on, but it goes all the way up until this current film. The idea that Godzilla at some point crosses over from bad guy to good guy. At some point, Godzilla stops being a destroyer and starts being a protector. Now he still destroys, but ultimately he protects. The beginning of Godzilla versus Kong, there's a CNN breaking news alert, which is Godzilla's no longer friendly. Godzilla's no longer on our side. What the fuck?
He's gone rogue.
He's gone rogue. Yeah. It's like that, it's like it didn't happen to the Watchmen, but like the biggest fear of all is like, what if Dr. Manhattan turns bad? Like then we're fucked. So that kind of happened with Godzilla in the beginning. And that's interesting to me too. That for a very long time, and it's clear in this movie too, that Godzilla 2000, that Godzilla is a protector, right? It's interesting to me that like there is this push and pull between, Godzilla came from kind of, not great circumstances, but like I think we can maybe hone this and maybe use it to our advantage, and maybe like he becomes our asshole, maybe he becomes our nuclear bomb, maybe he becomes the guy who protects us, and I think that's kind of an interesting way of looking at this with the progression of nuclear power. Obviously, Japan is, a nuclear country in terms of how they get their energy. They've had reactor meltdowns. They've had horrible fallouts from that. The idea that you can corral something like this, and I'm also not someone who sits here and is like, nuclear energy is bad. I don't really think nuclear energy is bad. I think nuclear energy in general is like really kind of good. It's really clean and generally really safe. So like, I think this is really, I am on that like kind of tip where I'm like, I think that maybe Godzilla, maybe we can hone this, but maybe I'm an idiot. Am I an idiot? Am I like setting us up for disaster?
I feel like Kong is easier to try and control because he has a connection usually with a human in his movies. Godzilla's really more of the rebel. Like in the movie Godzilla vs. Kong, he's clearly the badass in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
The humans are clearly more scared of Godzilla than they are of Kong, because Kong has this relationship with that adorable little girl, and it gives them some semblance of, at least they can communicate with him. I'm not sure. Yeah, exactly. So
it also feels like Kong has sort of, I watched the first King Kong for the first time for this AFI club that I do with friends, and Kong in that film is a lot more of a straight up villain, if there, I mean, or at least for the more so in the sense that he doesn't have the emotional relationship with Ann Darrow that he has in future Kong films. He literally eats people. Good.
Came into his fucking Skull Island.
I'm not suggesting that the humans are good in the film, Kenny, or that he's not justified in his anger. I'm just saying that he is a little bit more, he's certainly more violent in terms of the way that he is towards humans. And it feels like Kong has softened over the films, the way that they perceive him and the way that we use him. And he's much more of a sort of quote unquote good guy than Godzilla, who's just more of an X factor.
I disagree with this take so hard, dude. This story is told from the perspective of Anne. She has a connection with King Kong.
Not in the first one.
Every move he makes is to protect her. Every move.
It's not. She's terrified of him through the entire film.
I understand.
She has no emotional connection to him whatsoever.
I understand, but
compare her to Naomi Watts in the Peter Jackson film. And you see how Ann Darrow in that film is someone who starts off as scared, starts to understand who Kong is about midway through the film, and it becomes about her trying to ultimately protect him.
But a serious question,
later.
Like, why would I care about Ann Darrow's point of view when I'm confident that throughout he never hurts her? He only wants to protect her. He is protecting her, and you are King Kong's a tragedy. You're absolutely supposed to feel like they killed something beautiful and they killed something innocent for no reason. Like I
think he's definitely a tragic character. At the heart of it, he's lonely. That's the thing, is that he's lonely. And he likes having. He's definitely an adversary. Like Phil is saying, like, he's the thing that stands between what the human heroes want. They want to get Ann Darrow back, and he's the thing that stands in the way of that. So they're definitely scared, and he definitely kills people. Like they're on a log, and he's like spinning the log. And he's
obviously King Kong is a tragic figure. I'm not
trying to kill her.
I think at the end of the day, it stems from him being lonely, though. That's what makes him this tragic thing, is that he wants to protect this person so he won't be lonely.
He wants to protect the dog.
Right. Sure, I agree with all of that. I'm not suggesting that Kong isn't tragic or that there isn't layers to the character. I think that ultimately those layers and that sort of quote unquote humanity, or however you want to associate it, I think is what has made Kong a lasting character. I think that in comparison to Godzilla, who is more of an X factor, who kind of kills indiscriminately for all intents and purposes, he's just a little bit more binary, I guess, in a way that I don't know that Kong is.
Yes, I agree with that. But there's a big difference between these two characters, at least in the beginning.
I agree.
Kong really is an uncontrollable force of nature. He is not. I'm not sorry. Godzilla is an uncontrollable force of nature. He is not a character. He is the dilemma. What do we do with Kong? What do we do with Godzilla?
Sure.
Kong is the protagonist of the movie. Like, Kong is the one you live and die with. Kong is the one you feel bad for. Kong is the one who you can kind of understand where he's coming from. They came into his home. They brought a vulnerable person into his world that they don't understand. He's the only one who can protect her from monsters, from, the very un-PC native population. He's the only one who cares about her. The fucking movie people just want to use her and don't even tell her where she's going. Then they go back. He's in fucking chains. I mean, again, I think this is a slavery allegory. And I have never in my life seen the shot until I watched this movie of Kong hitting every fucking rung down the ladder.
It's brutal. It's
Of
awful.
course, it's that is not the death you give to your villain. That's a death you give to your hero. And that's what he was. He was a hero.
I'm truly not disputing any of this with you. I'm just saying that in the first King Kong film, he is having watched it with 5 other people and us all having the same reaction to being surprised by how violent Kong is in the film and how that has evolved over the years in terms of the Kong character. That's all I'm saying. That's not saying that his violence is not warranted. I'm just saying that it's just a slightly different version of Kong in that first film.
He literally punches Godzilla in the face. But all right, go ahead.
But I will say in the original, the coin flips. There's a point where he's the most powerful thing on the island, but then he's in chains for the second half of the movie.
Sure.
That's where he becomes more of the sympathetic hero. Like, even though he did all these things, like when you see him in chains on that stage in the original, you're like, this is awful.
It's awful.
And anything he does after that, I was like, you humans brought this on yourself.
I know that it's very dicey to compare a giant ape to human slaves. But this is about someone who ruled his homeland, was unceremoniously taken from that place by white people in chains, put up in front of a bunch of other white people on a stage for money, and then had the gall to escape, and then was killed for it. It is the most clear slave metaphor of all time, and I don't think anybody cares that he ate a couple of these fucking colonizers. That's it.
Anyway,
I mean, it's an issue with Godzilla versus Kong is that, like I said, Godzilla is a symbol. That's why you're not really in his point of view for very much of that movie. There's a reason the audience puts you in Kong's point of view for a lot more of the movie, because he is sympathetic, he is empathetic, he does have a connection with humans, and he even has human facial expressions. You know, through the movie.
There's a depth and a history to this character that Godzilla, a different one at the very least. I think that. In Godzilla versus Kong, I mean, truthfully, it's probably like 70% Kong and 30% Godzilla, something along those lines. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the film. I thought it was a lot of fun. I thought the last 30-40 minutes of it were just gorgeous action, special effects that I haven't seen. I wish I saw them on the big screen.
I mean, I really liked it because it righted a great wrong for Godzilla fans.
What's that?
Which is that in the 60s version, King Kong wins. King Kong wins.
Of course.
And I love this movie that they basically fight twice and Godzilla wins both times. Well, like, I know there's a scene where they say, "Oh, that round goes to Kong," and I'm like, "No, it didn't."
I mean, listen, I think that I would argue that Kong certainly gives him a good run for his money in the middle there.
Definitely. It was a draw. They got to give him an axe. That was the movie. It was a draw.
Yeah, I mean, they got to give him a weapon, and they give him this kind of cool axe, sort of like Thor's hammer, I guess, sort of.
I actually think it's meant to be one of Godzilla's fins, like that jagged piece. I think possibly.
His fins are amazing.
His fins are amazing. I thought, I mean, just the like the whole like neon color palette of the cityscape when they're fighting in this. I do love that Godzilla at one point when he puts his foot on him and it's basically like a stay down, you're fucking done. Is great. I thought Mechagodzilla looked really great in this as well. But to pivot back to Godzilla 2000 real quick, there's not a ton of plot really. I mean, there's like a fucking UFO that comes to town and Godzilla has to beat the UFO. The UFO kind of turns into Orga at the end. The last like 20 minutes of this film are the goods, because like that's kind of what I was looking forward to, which is like he's got to fight the UFO, then he's got to fight Orga, and by fight I mean crawl inside him and blow him up from the inside. All that stuff is fucking great. It's a little, and I think Kenny kind of was circling this earlier, it's a little too UFO heavy for like the first 40 minutes or so.
Yeah.
You really just wish there was more Godzilla. But what are your sort of thoughts on Godzilla 2000 and how it sort of fits into the oeuvre?
for me, I really enjoyed this movie. It's hard for me to not find this movie charming. First of all, it's only the third Godzilla movie. At the time it came out, it was the only the third Godzilla movie I'd seen on a giant screen. Like I had seen Godzilla in 1985 had come out, and then there was the TriStar Matthew Broderick one, and then this one. And a funny thing that people always make fun of the effects, like, oh, they built those cardboard buildings. I think something people don't grasp is when you see it on a giant screen, it's actually a lot more believable.
Really?
The effect sells a lot more. It's still not 100% like the legendary movies, but it works a lot better. And I mean, I loved it because it was also a return. Clearly, this movie was meant to be, let's reinvigorate our brand. Let's remind people what Godzilla is. In a kind of funny thing, Godzilla in his movies is normally black or gray or charcoal gray. But for some reason in the pop culture, he exists as green. Like if you look at the Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 80s, he's emerald green. So it's like a weird thing. And this is the first time I think Toho ever said, let's go into that. Let's actually make them kind of green because we're trying to remind people about the Godzilla that's in their heads that they love. You know, so that part of it, you know, I loved. And I also a little bit understand why they were a little more in the UFO-centric part because Godzilla's existed in like 20 other movies. I think they're operating a little bit from the point of view. It's like, look, the audience knows what Godzilla is about, and we need to explain how this adversary can defeat him. You know, basically. The funny thing about Orga is they never say his name in the American cut of the movie. I know. I only learned it from merchandising.
I only learned it from Wikipedia.
And the funny thing is, even the reason he's called that is cut from the movie because in the Japanese cut, that protein that the monster's always searching for is called organizer G1. So they call him Orga because of that. But even in the American version of it, they call it regenerator G1. So they don't even get into why it would be called Orga.
Yeah, because the UFO is trying to copy Godzilla's DNA because his ability to regenerate. And that manifests itself as Orga, I guess.
Basically, it's the strongest creature on Earth, so why not copy it? And it has the thing that I need to let me exist on this planet. You know, but it's funny because the movie has a very, like I said, there's that Heisei era. It adheres to that formula kind of closely. You would think, oh, we're rebooting Godzilla, we're launching a whole new franchise, you might try something a little more daring, but I think they saw the TriStar one as that it got too far away from what Godzilla is. But it's like Godzilla appears, he's a threat, but then a worse threat shows up and Godzilla demolishes it for us.
One of the scenes that I loved early on was when Godzilla's attacking that village. Like, and you see him like coming down the street and all the people. I mean, I know it's such a classic Godzilla image, but it just looks fucking great. Like it's so iconic. And I thought that was great. The Godzilla underwater fighting the monster underwater looked pretty, like it's not as though there isn't a fair amount of Godzilla kind of sprinkled throughout the early hour of the film, but it's really sort of once you get into the meat of it at the end when he's really sort of fighting these creatures. But there's a great shot of the UFO on top of the skyscraper with all that like billowing smoke and then like
that's
blowing
I think one of the best shots in the movie.
It's a great shot.
And has sort of a red background too, which you don't really see in Godzilla.
The UFO really just kind of looks like a bike seat to me. Anyone else?
I think bike seat and bedpan are what most people say.
Or the Chicago bean. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Bedpan.
I do.
Jerks.
So one of
my
the
mind
cool
never
things,
goes there.
One of the cool things near the end when the fight is sort of evolving is these tentacles that the UFO kind of disperses, and you have like Godzilla fighting these tentacles. It had a very kind of Plan 9 from Outer Space kind of like a little Ed Woody in terms of like him sort of fighting all of these tentacles. And then like, so the UFO clones Godzilla's DNA and he becomes this Orga thing. And Godzilla breaks free and sets Orga ablaze with his atomic breath. But Orga re-emerges, essentially unhinges its jaw, if you will, and then just sort of swallows it, but sort of like slowly and incrementally in a way that I loved, but it made me kind of think of like Little Shop of Horrors.
Yeah.
Like it felt like Audrey 2 opening up its mouth to like, which I love, obviously.
I hate to say it, when I saw it in the theaters,
Yeah.
it was hard not to see something somewhat sexual going on.
I thought it was
You
pretty
think?
sexual.
Between, it's like, I can take all you got, and Godzilla's like, we'll see.
Yeah. I thought it was,
and then he kills him.
sexual.
It's also a rookie move on Orga's part. Like, you know that Godzilla's going to blow you up from the inside.
That's
like,
right.
you gotta. What do you? Anyway,
I think Orga's thinking is, if I can just get enough of his DNA fast enough, I'll be powerful. I'll be powerful enough to resist whatever that is.
Did that not happen? What happens in the next one? You can blow it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next one. No, Orga's done for good in this
Interesting.
movie. I have to say, it's not my favorite design of one of his enemies.
Yeah.
So,
it did look like you could just like tip him
so what
over
are your
if you
favorite?
had to.
Who are your favorite enemies?
Yeah.
Who are the guys or the ladies?
My favorite Godzilla. My favorite enemy is probably this guy named Gigan. You mentioned him earlier.
Gigan.
He's like these hook hands and buzzsaw chest, which always made him very scary and cool. Mechagodzilla's always been the one that sort of, I felt, got the closest to killing Godzilla, like, on screen. So I'd say those two are my favorite. And then, like, King Ghidorah, of course, or King Ghidorah as he called now, he's really scary too. So I would say those are like my top three. Those are the ones that can give Godzilla a run for his money.
Mechagodzilla is fucking dope.
It's really dope.
Yeah.
And he also showed up in Ready Player One. If you want to see a different one, he's in Ready Player One also.
I'm sure he's going to show up in Space Jam.
Oh, King Ghidorah is the one with the 3 heads.
Yeah.
All right. So talk to me a little bit about Mothra.
Okay.
What do I need to know about Mothra?
Mothra's the third big giant monster movie Toho made. Godzilla was the first. Rodan was the first one they made in color. Yes. And then Mothra is the third one. And Mothra is very different from the other ones because, again, she's mom. Mothra is typically referred to as female, is linked to 2 humans. So she is more sympathetic. She has more of a connection to people. And what she does, she doesn't do out of destruction. It's not meant to, like, punish humankind. You know, in the first movie, yes, because they kidnapped the 2 little girls, and Mothra's just trying to rescue the two twins. They're not little girls. They're like grown up, shrunk twins. And so Mothra's always been sort of always the good guy. Mothra is the hero of the movies. The movie where Godzilla becomes a superhero, which is the next one after Godzilla, Mothra versus Godzilla, where Mothra, 3 different kinds of Mothra defeat Godzilla. The next one is called Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster, or Ghidorah, the 3-headed monster. Sure. Mothra is the one that goes to Godzilla and Rodan and says, hey, we all need to work together to fight this 3-headed monster. This 3-headed monster will not just destroy all the humans, but it'll destroy all of us. So the 3 of us all have to work together. And Godzilla and Rodan say, no, we're not going to help these humans. All they do is shoot missiles at us. Why should we help? Okay. So Mothra, in the worm form, the larva form, goes to fight King Ghidorah by itself and gets its butt kicked. And when Godzilla and Rodan see Mothra's bravery over facing this monster alone, that's when they join the fight and take out Ghidorah. So Mothra is this important character. In the Heisei series, Godzilla vs. Mothra is the highest attended one. I think because Mothra has a little more appeal for women. I think, you know, women and little girls find Mothra more interesting than Godzilla.
I think these are all fucking sweet. Yeah, I think they're all awesome.
So can I ask a quick thing? In the last Godzilla film, previous to Godzilla vs. Kong, which is Godzilla King of the Monsters, which I have not seen, did not hear great things about, a lot of these monsters appear in this film, correct?
Yeah, they're all in it. King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra, and then there are all these other just random titans that show up in it.
Okay. What were your thoughts? Did you enjoy this Godzilla film?
It was kind of a funny thing because it really felt like a Japanese Godzilla movie made with American money, basically.
Right.
Like, it was like, we have a machine that lets us control monsters, which brings all these monsters onto the playing field, and they kind of fight each other.
Right.
You know, I enjoyed it. I liked seeing, there were 2 things I loved about it. I loved seeing CG versions of all the famous monsters like Rodan and Mothra and King Ghidorah. Like, we'd seen Godzilla already. And it's the first American Godzilla movie where they use pieces of the Japanese theme. of Godzilla. So there's this famous Godzilla composer. His name's Akira Ifukube. Forgive me if I'm butchering that name. His scores are always the best, and they've always used his Godzilla theme in other Godzilla movies. And I remember sitting in the theater for Godzilla King of the Monsters where they play his theme in it. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I love it. I love seeing this. You know?
So at the end of this film, there's a really great moment, I think, where the villain, Mitsu, is standing in front of Godzilla and he just screams Godzilla into his face before he kills him, which I just feel is just, I don't know.
I think his name is Katagiri, actually.
Oh, his first name is Mitsu, I believe.
Oh, Mitsu. Okay. Yeah. I only remember them calling him Katagiri in the movie. I have to say, he's a very, typically in Godzilla movies, the human characters aren't the most interesting thing in them, especially when you're a little kid. You're like, just get back to the monsters. Yeah. I feel like Katagiri was actually one of the more interesting human characters in Godzilla. He's Javert. He's Javert from Les Miserables,
I thought him and the I guess it's the father character, like the reporter. I liked him too. Like I actually did feel like those characters were pretty well drawn, all things considered.
Yeah. Shinoda's a great hero. He's appeared in like maybe 2 other Godzilla movies. This is the first time he was the lead in a movie. Okay. The interesting thing about him is his American dubbed voice is, if you're a fan of Lost, whenever they would find a new facility in Lost, there'd be an orientation film with a Japanese guy in it.
The Dharma Initiative.
The Dharma Initiative.
Dr. Richard Candle.
Something like that.
He always had
He's the voice.
Always had a different name that was Candle related. I love that guy. That guy's name is like Francois something. He has a French.
Francois Chow.
Francois Chow, yeah.
And I think he's the American voice of Shinoda. And I didn't realize that until I recently watched Raya and the Last Dragon, because I was like, that's the voice of Shinoda from Godzilla 2000. And so I went and looked him up. I was like, oh, it's that guy. Cool.
That's amazing. I also, this speaks to Kenny's thesis about sort of all of these films to some degree or another. But I do love at the end of the film, they're standing on the roof and they're reminiscing about how Godzilla was wrought on by human ambition and what have you, and which prompts what am I looking at a picture of?
Oh, Francois.
Oh, that's amazing. That's dope.
That's the
Kenny.
First picture I have on my phone, taken in 2009.
That's amazing.
When he auditioned for Entourage, and it's the only time I have ever taken a picture with a celebrity. I don't do that, but I had to because I was so Lost obsessed. And it was me and Eric Harrell, who is a TV writer as well, a very talented person.
That's amazing.
And we were obsessed.
Nice.
So Shinoda is standing on the roof, and he suggests that Godzilla exists in us as Godzilla begins rampaging through Tokyo.
Which is a much maligned line among Godzilla fans. Yeah, really? Godzilla fans, like, I remember in the theater, everyone was like, what?
Interesting. Yeah, people just don't want to look inwards when it comes to their inner Godzilla.
That's right.
Interesting.
I think he's right. Interesting. I think the fans are. I think the fans are right. I don't think Godzilla does exist within us. I think he exists without us.
When I was in the theaters, I couldn't help but feel like you're trying to attach a meaning to this that maybe your movie didn't fully get across. So the funny thing is, like, you're right, they do a lot of philosophizing at the end, but I will say the ending, while very different from other Godzilla movies, Godzilla normally wades out to the water after killing the enemy, but in this one he stays and continues burning Japan down, and I'm like, I feel like this negates a lot of the points you guys are making. Like, you're trying to say that, like, why does he protect us? I'm like, but he's not. Like, he's burning like he came to burn stuff down.
There's something, I mean, I love that they try to attach this philosophy to it. They say Godzilla exists in all of us, and then you cut to Godzilla just basically being, fuck all of this.
That's
like,
right.
Which maybe does speak to us the way we see it, like our destructive nature does to some degree or another,
Yeah, we do destroy the things we build and stuff.
Look at Phil finding some deeper meaning in a movie.
I never said there wasn't any meaning in these movies, dude.
Okay.
Well, what's sad is you would only learn this if you watch the theatrical cut. They actually cut it in the American Blu-ray cut. Is it had the worst title end card at the end of a movie you've ever seen.
Okay.
They did it here. I'm gonna show it to you for a second.
Okay.
If you can see this, I don't know if you can see it.
The end with a big old question mark in the middle of it. Yeah.
I don't know. It's a little. You can't really see
too
it.
bright, but yeah.
But it has the. I don't know how do I hang on for a second. Let me do this. Maybe this helps.
Yes, there you go.
The end.
So.
Yeah.
It's the worst font. It's the worst. The worst font. It's the worst color.
It's a bad
and it has this
mark.
cheesy. It's a bad question mark.
It's all
The
different
Riddler
color.
wouldn't be caught dead with that question.
Yeah. So, being the only person who probably watched the Blu-ray with the commentary on, the producer said this was a mistake. That
well, there you go.
They said they got the wrong font, and then so they snipped it out of the any future release of it. But I remember
it was not in the version I saw on Amazon.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But I was loving the movie, and then that came up, and I was like, wait, what? I'm like, I kind of appreciate it because it does have like, that old monster movie feeling, but it was
I am always into some ridiculous the end question mark or to be continued maybe or any stupid like ending thing like that. I love cheesiness, but that's ugly. I agree. That's aesthetically unpleasing.
Do you want to rate this movie, Kenny?
I do.
I'm going to let you go first.
I'm gonna ask to go last.
Fine.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
Which I've never done on the pod before.
That's fine.
But I have a reason.
I'll go first. It doesn't bother me. I didn't see this film in '99, so I can't really speak to how I would have felt about it then. Watching it the other day, I watched it after I watched Godzilla versus Kong, which maybe was unfair to it. I'm not sure, but so it was a little bit of a jarring thing to see these two films next to each other because they're very different. So in the beginning of this, I had to sort of acclimate to it, and it didn't take that long, but it did take me a beat. I'd say that going into this podcast, I was at around a 65. I liked it. I didn't totally lock into it in all of the ways that I was hoping I would. I certainly had my issues with the UFO stuff. But I was engaged the whole time. I thought it was a lot of fun. Talking with you on and learning a little bit more about sort of the backstory and giving me a little bit more sort of context to it, I like it more. I'd probably give it let's say a 70 now. I think that it's and also Kenny's thoughts in terms of the grander notions that were perhaps involved in it, I think helps as well. Yeah, I mean, it makes me kind of want to go buy that Criterion box set and just start at the beginning and watch them, because it does feel like, I think, and I don't want to speak to the masses as a whole, but that I've been dismissive of Godzilla, that I've kind of put him in this B movie box, and that it's all just kind of silly, and that's not fair to it. I think there's on top of what Kenny's saying about the allegories and metaphors that exist within it, I also just think that there's a lot of craft in this that I think a lot of people don't necessarily give enough credence to. And I think that, now with us living in a CG universe, where as cool as Godzilla versus Kong looks, and it does look very cool, there's something about a guy in a suit that feels tactile, that feels, just very real, that really worked for me. So I'm probably at around a 70. What about you, Ann?
Cool. So I saw this in the theaters. I think I only saw it once. Mm-hmm. Sadly, I don't think it was in theaters long enough to maybe see it like a bunch of times. I'm also very nostalgic for it because like I said, my brother was probably my entree into loving monster movies. And this is one of the last movies I remember us seeing together in our old hometown of West, and in our old home theater. And I have to say, I bounced out of the movie theater. I was like, I love this movie so much. It was just so much fun to see. And again, like I said, it was only the third time I'd seen a Godzilla movie in a big theater. It's only the second Japanese Godzilla movie I'd seen in a theater. So I was bouncing out of the theater. I loved it. I would probably have given it a 95 if you asked me.
Wow. Okay. All right.
If you'd asked me right when I walked out of the theater, I was like, this was so much fun. And I will just also say, like I said, the human drama in Godzilla movies doesn't always work. I think it worked in the original, the one that you saw. There was a love triangle with the scientist and the daughter.
Oh, that Kenny saw in the original one? Yes. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, Kenny saw that one.
Yeah.
I have to say the human drama in this is pretty good. It's a pretty strong entry in the Godzilla movies. I think Shinoda and Katagiri represent different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
I think there's a great relationship between Yuki, the reporter, and Io, the daughter, because it starts off as bratty younger sister and bossy older sister, and it evolves more into a maternal thing. Like that moment when Yuki turns the car around and heads back to the building to see if Shinoda's alive, like I was like, wow, this is like really affecting me. Like she really cares about that little girl. And when Shinoda's alive, like all of that stuff worked much better than a lot of other Godzilla movies, I have to say. So I would probably give it 90 or 95 coming out of the theater. I will say probably my score went down just because the Millennium franchise didn't come together the way I wanted it to. Like there's 6 movies in the franchise, and each one, except for one, restarts the continuity. Like there's no connection between those movies. Godzilla 2000 is probably my favorite Millennium movie, which is a controversial opinion. I think most people would pick a movie called GMK. But, some of the VFX didn't age very well. And obviously with the legendary Godzilla movies, you can see what a great looking Godzilla movie is. So I would probably, usually we say our grade in 99 and our grade this year. I would say it probably dropped, but it's still a Godzilla movie I love. I'd probably say it dropped to like an 80 or an 85.
Fair enough.
Like that. But it was definitely a movie that like reminded me why I loved Godzilla movies.
That's awesome. I mean, what else could you ask for?
That's right.
Kenny?
All right. The reason I wanted to go last
is because you're going to give it a really bad grade?
No. I responded, I give it a 50. I can't decide. And I wanted to see if I was swayed one way or another by your grades. Because I look, I don't think this is a great movie, and I don't think it's a great Godzilla movie. That being said, I haven't seen a lot of Godzilla movies, so I don't know. But what you mentioned something earlier, Phil, about how it has one foot in the, kind of the older classic Godzilla, pool, and another foot in kind of this more modern Godzilla pool, and that worked for you. But for me, it felt a little fish nor fowl. Now, I do want to say something. The foul part does nothing for me, right? The modern stuff is not like my Godzilla, right? That doesn't excite me the way the old men in rubber suits thing excites me. That's cool as shit, and that's weird and fun and awesome. So I do think the attempts to kind of modernize it didn't work for me. And I like more of the, like, I love the idea of the Godzilla prediction agency or whatever it's called. I like the idea that this is a country that's been ravaged by monster attacks for the last 50 years. I love the idea that they're figuring out a way to work with it. They're figuring out whether this guy's, friend or foe. They're all of those things. But ultimately this movie wasn't like, it didn't slay me. All that being said, I don't think it's bad. I'm very happy I watched it. I want to watch more. I certainly want to watch ones from the 60s and 70s that look like a ton of fun and super weird and super gonzo. But in terms of that, I don't feel like this gave me the like crazy ass shit, and I think Orga sucks. So
not my favorite creature design.
There's not a lot to it, right? It's just not a lot. It's that foot in the modern that I feel that they felt pressured to kind of speak to that doesn't really work for me as much. I'm gonna give it a 53. I am gonna give it definitely in the positive. Definitely like I'm happy to tell people to watch it because it's a fucking Godzilla movie and they rule no matter what. I know it's probably hard to watch it on a giant screen, but watch it on the biggest TV you can, as you do with all Godzilla movies. And it's, I'm happy I watched it. I'm happy we had one. I'm happy we had an organic opportunity to talk about this moment in history, Phil, when Godzilla versus Kong is all the rage.
It's all the rage. And Anupam, we're thrilled to obviously have you on. In terms of
always thrilled to have you on.
Always thrilled to have you on. We'll definitely would love to have you back. And just in terms of giving us the context of, you know, a diehard fan that can give us sort of the perspective of what this film was like for being, you know, a lover of this whole genre.
This has been fantastic, because sometimes Godzilla fandom can be a lonely fandom.
Sure.
You know, it's like if you go to Comic-Con, someone's like, Highlander's my thing. I'm like, great. Cool. You know, like something. But because we're all TV writers, I feel like everyone has a foot in Luke Skywalker. Like everyone understands the hero's journey, or Spock and Resurrection. Like everyone kind of understands Star Trek and Star Wars. Godzilla a little bit less. So just like getting a chance to talk about Godzilla for 2 hours makes me so happy.
Please. I mean, listen, I'm thrilled to do it. Obviously, not just because we get to talk with you about Godzilla, but, you know, also just in terms of this moment where, like, it does feel as though this film seems to be scratching an itch for a lot of people. And that's fun. And I'll be curious to see what they do with these franchises kind of moving forward. It feels like it, you know, could be a rebirth to some degree or another to these franchises, which have been sort of wobbly, like successful, but not like crazy successful. So I'm curious to see where they go with it.
Like wobbly is a good word for it. But this was, but this does feel like it's that Superman versus Batman thing that was so flubbed with the DC thing. Like, this did feel a little bit like a climax. They had one movie for each before going into it. There's mythology behind this, and people were really primed for it. I'm surprised by how much it kind of took over the culture for this moment.
It also feels a little bit like they, you know, Adam Wingam, who directed the film, I just think really understood what people wanted. Whether or not it's a quote unquote good movie, he understood what people were looking for. Like an hour 45, it's in, it's out, it knows what it's doing. It's silly. You know, I think it really worked for what it's worth. But again, thank you so much, Anupam, for coming on. Next week,
absolutely,
we are doing this really just shows the breadth of 1999. We're going from Godzilla 2000 to Girl on the Bridge. A black and white, beautiful love story with Vanessa Paradis. It's a little tricky to find, so you know, search it out. It's out there, but you'll have to kind of look under some rocks to find it.
Under a rock, worth it.
But it's absolutely worth it. I don't know. Have you seen this film, Anupam? Do you know of this film?
I have not. I haven't seen it.
It's. I think I can speak for Kenny. Both of our a definite favorite of 99. It's
one of our favorites. Yes, for sure.
One of our favorites for sure. It's a really lovely love story about a knife thrower who is suicidal and meets another woman on a bridge who is also contemplating suicide. So she becomes his assistant. And it's very French. It's very darkly comedic and beautiful and romantic. And we were lucky enough to have David Ehrlich on from IndieWire, who's one of our favorite film critics.
But I don't believe he's a favorite among the Godzilla fandom. That's my sense.
That is very possible.
My sense. My sense.
He is a little critical of Godzilla.
My sense is he does not like this Godzilla versus Kong very much, and
he did not.
And he's having a bit of a moment for it. But he's a wonderful guy, and
he's a wonderful guy. It's a love fest of an episode. It's the three of us just every now and then. I think Kenny. I think Kenny enjoys it too when we all love a movie and we all just get to just. Heap a lot of love on a film that maybe people haven't seen. So very exciting in that regard.
Particularly a movie that I didn't know existed before this podcast. All right. Always a pleasure.
Thank you so much for coming on, and we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
1999. Podcast like it. You want to